Hello, my name is Colin Graham, and I'm a Community Development Manager for the Ontario Native Women's Association. Bonjour, Nigani Gabo Nishnakaz, Ochichagwe Babagonigan Nindoji, Atikdodam. And I'm joined here today with the beautiful and talented Miss Mona Hardy.
Bonjour, Mona Hardy Dishnikas, Nijkowabik Zavagin Donji, Miskoki Gwaji Bagoan and Niki.
Mona, I've been meaning to ask you more about a quote that you once stated, and that was around motherhood being the oldest living profession. I know that it came from when you and I when we first started anti-human trafficking work in Thunder Bay for the province, around addressing how do we fight the oldest living profession in the world in regards to prostitution.
And that's when I intervened and said, it's not the oldest prostitution. Motherhood and agriculture are the oldest professions. It started at the beginning of time. It's even in the Bible. It started when Adam and Eve were thrown out of the Garden of Eden. And then they have to start working really. And both agriculture and motherhood are both nurturing, because you need to nurture your garden in order to grow. And as you nurture your children, you want them to grow also.
I just want to really highlight that quote was so powerful, not only for me, but it was a guiding quote for how we did this work, especially all the work around anti-human trafficking, because it was really it's really what framed how we did the work, in that it was, when we were working with survivors, we had to do it in a very nurturing way.
Well, I think nurturing is a good approach, because, a lot of these young people, especially the young people that are taken away and ran away from home, because and it goes right back to the Indian residential schools. And they were taken away, nobody was nurtured, and they came home, they had children. How can you nurture if you don't know how to nurture, if you've never been nurtured? Mm-hmm. And I think that now it's time that we intervene and start nurturing these people.
Well, it's that, like I said, it was the framework is how, and the guiding force behind how we've been able to combat combat human trafficking, but it was also it really led the way when it came to being survivor focused and survivor led. So I want you to know that when it came to this work, it was instrumental on ensuring that the voices of survivors were heard, but also the start to building leadership within women who have experienced such violence. Mona, I think it's really important to acknowledge that for the bulk part of your career, you have been committed to ending violence against Indigenous women. And a big part of that as well has been addressing all the work, the sexual exploitation of Indigenous women. And I want to ask you now why you think it's so important that this be talked about, that we focus our efforts on working against anti-human trafficking.
I think the more that we talk about it, the more people have knowledge of what's going on. And that's very, very important, because without knowledge, ignorance is not bliss. You have to know what's going on in your community. The more people more they hear about it, more people will get involved. Yeah.
When it comes to community safety, I think it's important. And we've had conversations where the women who have experienced exploitation not only know how to take care of themselves, but have their own network of taking care of each other. How do we as a community come together to talk about community safety?
I think education is very important at every level in our community, not just for safety. The whole community is involved. It has to be involved in this safety. There's a lot of things happen when girls are working on the street. There could be murders. Kids could be picked up. The children can't go out and play. So the more we educate people, and I think the more voices that are heard, it becomes a safer place for everyone.
Mona, you were a really big part of the engagements for the Indigenous Anti-Human Trafficking Liaison Program. And not only were you a knowledge carrier with all your experience, you gave a lot of perspective and guidance. With that, I'm curious to know, where do we go from here? What is it that the survivors really need?
They need a lot of nurturing. They need compassion. They don't want to be judged. They want to be accepted like everybody else in society. I think judging people are just so terrible. It doesn't do anybody any good. It really doesn't. But when you're working with them, you have to be totally honest. You have to go in there with a passion. If you don't really like your job, that's a job you shouldn't be working. Seriously. This is a very rough job. You have to be committed. You really have to be.
So Mona, I would like to take this opportunity to extend on behalf of myself as well as the Ontario Native Ones Association for coming here today and sharing in your experiences, but also sharing in the knowledge that you have in relation to anti-human trafficking. July 30th is the United Nations Day Against Trafficking in Persons, and I encourage you, if you don't have a copy, come up to our website and learn about Journey to Safe Spaces and rise up and break the silence with us and educate yourselves about what human trafficking is and what it looks like in your community.